Thank you so much for having us. Every time we go back to Israel, I always try to give over to my kids at least the feeling that it is to be with amazing souls when we travel. And the words don't come. It's very, very elusive. So I'm very thankful that my son is here with us today so he could begin to understand, what we're talking about and experience it. So thank you so much for having us, and we love you very, very much. I know some of you came from far and close, and we're thankful. Today, I would like to discuss, yesterday we read in the diaspora the Torah portion of the Spies, and my husband spoke so beautifully about that yesterday. And what I had wanted to do was speak about the Haftorah portion that is attached to the Torah reading. And as many of you or all of you already are aware, that this is a weekly cycle, just as the Torah is a weekly cycle. And there's, different ideas and different opinions about when the Haftorah actually was attached to the Torah portion reading, and different reasons for that. Some say it was Ezra HaSofer. Some say it was because it was so important to give over the message that the oral Torah and the written Torah, which is the 5 books, are actually one piece. Some related to the idea that there were edicts throughout Jewish history in which Torah reading was forbidden, and the ideas very often dovetail. And the idea was that the nation should be reading and absorbing the lessons that come through the Haftorah that mirror the Torah portion. So there are many different ideas. But today we're going to be reading chapter 2 in Joshua, which of course is speaking about his spies, which of course, on the most simple level, we say, oh, spies, that'll remind us about what's going on. And of course, as we know, Hashem's Torah is so deep and so infinite, and we will go, God willing, into one idea, and there are more ideas, but we want to see why this episode happened, why it's connected to the parsha that we read yesterday, and what's going on. So if with your permission, I would just like to very quickly read through some of it, just to get us going, okay? So it says, and I'm going to read it in the English, of course, but we're going to get back to the Hebrew because that's where so many of the secrets we find are. So it says follows: Joshua, son of Nun, dispatched 2 men, spies from Shittim, secretly, saying, go observe the land and Jericho. So they went and arrived at the house of a woman innkeeper whose name was Rachav, and slept there. It was told to the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come here this night from the children of Israel to spy out the land. The king of Jericho sent Rachav, saying, bring out the men who have come to your house, for they have come to spy out the entire land. And it goes on, to the woman thinking on her feet very, very quickly, and she sends them on this wild goose chase. She says, they were here. I didn't know who they were. They're no longer here. They're gone. You should have locked the gates. Run, run, run. And meanwhile, she hides them upstairs, and she tells them that, she relates to them the feelings of the nations, how the nations are all in terror. They remember the crossing of, out of Egypt. And they remember the short while ago, with the big bridge of 38 years, Sichon and Og, the battles, and they are all shaking in their boots and terrified because the nation of Israel is poised to enter. And then she hides them in some flax, and she sends them down out the window only after they promise to save her and her family. And she says, go run and hide for 3 days. And that was the mission. So, this is a ridiculous scenario. There's so many questions that we have. The first question we have is, how could Joshua do this? He was one of the 12 spies. We read yesterday what a horrible trauma it was for the nation. and how it ended up so badly. And Hashem promised Yoshua and encouraged Yoshua, and Yoshua was on board. He experienced firsthand what a disaster sending out those spies were. So the first question we have is, how could he do this? That's question number one. The second question we ask is, what was the purpose? What was the purpose? So we could say, we read the text very simply, maybe this was some sort of recon, a military mission, to see what's going on, getting ready to go in. But there are problems with this idea. And one problem being that according to the oral tradition, the second set of spies was sent out by Joshua on the 7th of Nisan, and they were away for 3 days, and they returned on the 10th of Nisan, and that was the day that the nation of Israel crossed the Jordan into Israel. So we have a problem here because it can't possibly be a military mission. They barely made it back in time to join the nation of Israel crossing in, and they almost on that level seem irrelevant. And besides that, there's an indication that Joshua knew that the battle for Jericho would be a miraculous battle, because he says to them, sit and behold that tomorrow Hashem will be doing wonders in your midst. So some sages say that means he really already knew that it was not going to be, this first battle was going to be something else. So again, the idea that this was a mission that was military based already doesn't really jive so well. The second possibility is that this was motivational. The Jewish people were going through a lot. The spies left the nation, they left the camp the very day that the nation of Israel got up from their month-long mourning for Moses. Moshe, he cradled them as a baby nation. He was with them in Egypt. He was with them through thick and thin, through all the misery and all the mistakes and all the turmoil, and he was gone. And now they're starting something completely different. And yesterday, as my husband was teaching about the parsha, we saw how different it would be. And it makes sense that maybe they need a little pep talk. It's hard times, it's scary, but that also falls to the ground, because it says that we look at the verse and it says they were sent out secretly. Secretly from whom? Because it says it's a double language. It says lachfor, he sent out meraglim cheresh, silently, secretly. So a spy is secretly. That's the purpose of a spy, to go in secretly. So the word cheresh is an extra word. It was secret, and the secrecy really was from the nation of Israel. They had no idea that this was happening. So it was not a motivational for them. They didn't, Joshua didn't need it. He passed the test with flying colors the first time around. So, it wasn't for them either. As a matter of fact, their names aren't even mentioned. We see tremendous differences between the first and second set of spies just on the face of it. And of course, this all goes much, much deeper, because the first set of spies was set out on the behest of the people, reporting back to the people with tremendous pomp and circumstances. The verses take up a lot of space, naming these 12 great men, and off they go. And Moshe asked them for specific things. It's a very high profile mission, involving the whole nation, at the behest of the nation, reporting back to the nation. And here we see, according to the verses that, according to when we read the Hebrew, that it says that he sends out the spies, he sends out the spies cheresh, secretly from everybody. Nobody knew. They're not named in the verse. Of course, the oral tradition does tell us who they are, but they're not named to highlight the secrecy of the mission. And of course, they were Kalev ben Yefuneh, from the tribe of Judah, who was the other spy along with Joshua, who did not have blurred vision and was right on the mark, and he could handle this. And the second one was Pinchas, who had sharp, straight vision, no nonsense, no PC, just goes with what Hashem wants. These were the two people that Joshua chose, and chose well. So again, it's not military. It's not motivational. What is it? What is it, and why is it? Now, we know that every single thing that is written for all time has relevance for all generations, relevance for the now, because otherwise it wouldn't be included. There's so many things that happened to the nation of Israel, so many things in history throughout the entire Tanakh that are not recorded, that were very important events, perhaps, very critical events, but not for all time, for bound in the time in which they happened. They didn't have timeless, universal relevance. So the minute something is included in the Tanakh, the first understanding we have is that it is for all time. So we want to understand what is for all time about this story. And interestingly enough, the first hint at it comes from verse 2 in this chapter, and it's spoken by the king's men. The king's men say, it was told to the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come this night from the children of Israel to spy out the land. And in Hebrew it says, lachfor et haaretz. Lachfor et haaretz. So there are many, many ways to express spy out the land. As a matter of fact, the Miraglim, by the first set of spies, it says latur, to tour. It sounds like what it is. And then it's here, liragel, Miraglim, spies. It's another way. But the servants of the king are giving us a clue about what's going on here. And it says lachfor. Lachfor literally means to excavate. It literally means to excavate. The king's men said they came to excavate the land. That's why they're here. So let's see what this means. So of course, when Joshua sent them out, he also said, he didn't give any specifics differently than Moshe, who gave specifics. He said, spy out the land and Jericho. He sort of like gives us two chapters. Now, this mission is a bomb. It's a bomb. If you think about the simplicity of it, they're sent to do something. They're there practically 5 minutes. There must be great intelligence. They're found out immediately. They end up in this home, which was actually, it doesn't, it's very interesting because in the English translation, it doesn't go with the simple text, which really indicates that it's some sort of brothel. And that's where they end up. They're there. They're totally at the mercy of a woman of very dubious distinction. And she calls all the shots. She tells them to run for the hills and hide. They run for the hills and hide and come home like, what happened? What are they, it's a bomb. Or is it not a bomb? And why is it here for all time? So if we're supposed to be now exploring the land and Jericho, as Joshua asked, first we know that names, words in Hebrew are very, very significant. And we go to the name of the first place that there was battle, Jericho, Yericho. Now, of course, Yericho, any of you that study Hebrew, very clearly imprinted in the name Yericho is reach, the sense of smell, So we know that, sight and speech, sound, touch, smell, these are our senses, and these are our gateways to experiencing the world that Hashem gave us. This is how we connect. This is how human beings connect with these senses. So Hashem gave us this sensual life experience in order to use these as pathways to elevate our material to the sanctified. Okay? And how do we know that we're going in that direction? Because the place is called Yericho, Reach. Some of you who have studied what happened in the Garden of Eden know that the only sense that was not damaged, was not impaired somehow, was the sense of smell. That remained intact in its highest, most potent form. So we're given this life as human beings to experience the world around us, to live the world around us, to connect with the antenna that are our senses, and to take in what's going on, create it into something, see it as something creatable for elevation, for sanctity. Now, this is what we were talking about. My husband spoke about it quite a bit yesterday, about the idea that the spies, the original set of spies, had a fatal and tragic mistake. They really and truly, and we'll understand it more deeply, saw the real world as something that could only pull us down. Now, they were in the incubator. They were in the incubator for, 40 years, literally living the miracles, eating the miracles, drinking the miracles, protected by the miracles, leaving Egypt on miracles, and they could not relate to a material realm that wouldn't pull us down. They saw the earthly existence that was given to us as people actually as an impediment to a meaningful relationship with Hashem. Instead of understanding that this itself, the humanity itself, was the conduit, could be, up to us, the conduit to the divine. So they really got into this space, again, good, well-intended, but they got into the space of what they wanted Hashem to want, or what Hashem should want, or what his ideas should be for mankind, rather than what it actually was according to Hashem's own word. So they really, really couldn't accept the fact that we could reach these spiritual heights as material beings. And they actually came back, they come back with this gigantic fruit, which ostensibly could be unbelievable bounty, but it says that in the parsha from yesterday, Shalach, chapter 13:32, we saw everything, like my husband said today. It was about seeing, how we visualize, how we perceive, how we translate. We saw that this is a land that eats its inhabitants. So what they were actually saying is the land, the artsiyut, aretz, land, eretz, land, artsiyut, material being, the land, the earthiness will swallow us up. Look at these grapes. It's like flip it on its head. The earth will swallow us. We cannot manage this. And so they saw the blessing as a curse. And they saw it because they had a very particular idea about how Hashem should be running his world. So they didn't, again, the idea is the refinement of the journey. That's what Hashem loves about us, simple human beings, that we have a journey, and through our exploration, through our struggles, through our efforts at dealing with our day and having to refine ourselves through our experience, we actually get to partner Hashem, as it were, in creation, because he put us here, and we can elevate the us here through using the material body and that he has given us. So The material nature of who we are is not the problem. The problem is that what we do with it, how we utilize it. Are we alienated from our physical self? Do we realize that this is something that could bring about sanctity? Are we bringing it to because we could, there's two different ways to look at it. There's very different ideologies. There are people that feel that, we're just a bunch of cells, like wandering in the universe. There's no before, there's no after. So nothing counts. And that sends us into a very hedonistic approach of our lives. And we see this with secularism to that nothing, like, my truth, my life, why does it matter? Me, because I'm just a bunch of cells. And then there's the opposite idea that many spiritual approaches, many religions have, which is that, there is a God and he's great and we're filthy and we can't connect and we're just pathetic and we're just waiting for our time to end so that, we could have some meaning. And those two poles come from the very same root of misunderstanding what it means to be a human being in Hashem's world. The opportunity that he gave us to be a human being in his world. So when the king's men actually said, these spies came here, lachfor et haaretz. They came to excavate the potential in the earth of who we are. And that doesn't speak to Canaan. It doesn't speak to that ideology. And they couldn't relate to it. But the first set of spies couldn't relate to it either. One of the things they were sent to do by Moshe, there's different things that Moshe is asking for, and the oral tradition goes very deeply into the deeper understandings of what Moshe was actually asking them to notice. And one of the things were, Hayesh ba'etz im ayin. Is there a tree or isn't there? Or is there none? And the sages teach us that what Moshe sent his spies to detect was the righteous potential among the Gentiles. And that's, he was, because now the nation is coming out of this long sidetrack and back onto mission. They learned a lot in the desert. They came away with a lot. It was a very precious growing time. It wasn't just, a blip on history, but now they were poised to get back into the original plan of what it meant to bring Hashem's light into the world. And of course, when we talk about tikkun, rectification, we're talking about a universal concept. And Moshe, understanding this, was saying, there's potential. Connect with it. So again, what I never saw this before, and yesterday at the center's Torah study, when they were reading the Haftorah, I literally didn't, when I did my research, I didn't even notice this, and then Baruch Hashem, I saw it yesterday, and it really blew me away, because when Moshe sends them out, it says, check it up if you read Hebrew, in chapter 13, verse 21, when they go out, it says the spies of Moshe got to Ad Rochav, Resh Chet Bet, Ad Rochav. Now we know that in the Torah scroll, if you've ever seen a Torah scroll, there is no vowels. There are no vowels. And the reason why there are no vowels is because there are layer upon layer upon layer, and that's one of the ways that the oral tradition emanates from the Torah. So we can read this, in other words, ad rochav, and it literally means until the expanses. Stop. Until the expanses, and that's where they got to. But when we read it, because it doesn't have the vowels, it spells exactly ad Rachav, until Rachav. Rachav is the woman that they connected with in Yericho. So Moshe is sending them out, and Rachav as the just like as the spies of Joshua are symbolic of Israel, Rachav is symbolic of the nations. And so Moshe is sending them out to continue this, Kol ha'aretz mala'eh et Hashem, that the entire universe will be filled on that day with Hashem's light, and saying to them, find it, and they get until there, and they stop. And their answer, because the idea was to look at Hashem's world in a very holistic way, looking for the potential in Hashem's creation, in themselves, in the land, in the people, in the nations. And they had a very, very tragic answer, which again is, we've read it so many times, but it's mind-boggling. So Moshe says, is there? And they say, their answer is Ephes. Now it's translated, and because it also means but it's not a regular usage of the word but. You see other words, aval, and different other words, ella, but Ephes. Ephes literally means zero. So they basically say, zero, ki az ha'am. So the one very common translation is, but the nations are very powerful. This is a great place, but no, I think we've got to pack up and replan because the nations are very powerful. But according to another simple meaning of the words, we're not digging anywhere. Ephes, zero. There is zero. Az ha'am. The nations are coarse. There's nothing here to share. We have no way to make that connection to bring Hashem's light into the world, which was the opposite of the entire purpose of creation since the very beginning. We know the whole conflict with Esav and Jacob was all about missing that boat, and again. Now they're coming back into the land. They're supposed to be continuing their mission, and the spies have this tragic answer in which their preconceived ideas about what Hashem should want blinded their vision, skewed everything for them, and they were not able to see. And of course, again, as we discussed yesterday, the whole idea, it's fascinating that the mitzvah of tzitzit was given after the sin of the spies, again, to the men, not to the women. I've had over the years too many times, and it makes me angry, that women, well-meaning women that, think that, we should be more feministic, or somehow the Torah is anti-women, and they say, why don't women wear tzitzit? Why? And I say, do you want to wear eyeglasses if you don't need them? And what the women did not sin in the sin of the spies. They did not lose that insight, that vision, that hope. They did not lose it, and the men did. And the whole idea of tzitzit, when you go and you read how Hashem gives out this mitzvah, it's about seeing. It says that so that you won't. It's really interesting. Lo taturu. Now, when the spies of Moshe went out, it says latur et haaretz, which literally means, to explore as a tourist, to be a viewer, outside viewer of the land. And then when the mitzvah of tzitzit is given, it says lo taturu, do not be an observer. Do not be an observer. That is not the way to do it, because you can't experience anything that way. You can't change. You can't grow. You can't influence. There's nothing that you could do with that. So that, it's perfect for the mitzvah of tzitzit. That was the whole mess up. So here come Joshua's spies. They come in, and because they are not stuck that way, and they are looking for a much deeper vision of what's going on, they actually recognize the latent greatness in Rachav very quickly, very, very quickly. And she introduces herself to her greatness, no problem. We see it in the verses, but it's this like window that opens up for both sides. This window, this connection that opens up, and so we want to understand, like, how are we blessed to get to that kind of vision? Because it's an incredible thing. There's so many things that happen to us in our lives, and It's horrifying to think that we can miss that window, that Hashem is bringing something to us and we're blinded by ourselves, only because we came in there with very rigid ideas about what should be and who we are and who the other person is supposed to be. And then we're not really listening. We're not really seeing. We're there, but it's not really happening. And what made Rachav, what made the spies of Joshua, Kalev and Pinchas, what made them able to get to that place of openness? And the answer is humility. And again, the fact that they're not mentioned and there's no pomp and circumstance. That's the message, this humility. When a person is truly humble, they're going with an open mind. When they went liragel, to spy out the land quietly, that they're not talking about it. A regel is a foot. They're stepping, they're going, like they're chofer, they're digging. They are in the moment. They're not above the moment. They're in the moment, because we ultimately see what we expect to see unless we really go in open to the moment. So, Rachav is a very intriguing character. She's a very, very intriguing character. She's full of contrasts. The verse calls her Isha Zonah, a prostitute. That's what it says in the verse. And then 2 seconds later, she's speaking words that are exactly what Moshe spoke. She's expressing emunah. Hashem gave you the land. He's not going to give you. He gave you the land. We're afraid. Everyone's afraid. On the simple level, they went to Jericho because the nations knew that the Jewish people were going to enter in from there, because that was a convenient place for them to enter in. And all the great warriors were converging on Jericho, because that was the place where they were going to do battle against Israel and the God of Israel. And they saw the same, 40 years earlier, the miracles of the Exodus. They recently, right before Moshe's passing, heard about the war of Sichon and Og, and they saw exactly what Rachav saw. And they decided they are battling God to the finish. And that's where they were. And Rachav, she says everything, she's telling over the same thing, and she comes to a completely different conclusion. And she mirrors the words of Moshe in Deuteronomy 4:38. V'yadatem hayom. And you will, my husband actually said this exact verse. V'yadatem hayom. It's really cool how we do that. We don't prepare together. And so I think it's really Hashem wanting us to say these things, because there's no other explanation. So, v'yadatem hayom, and you will know hayom, today. That means today in Lubbock, in the center. It's timeless. V'yadatem hayom, v'hashevota et levavecha. You will come back to your hearts, plural. Okay. Again, Rachav, a woman of contrast. Again, exhibiting for us the conflict within each of us, the pull between self and God, between confusion of what we think God should be and what He's actually having for us. And so she repeats over these same exact words. Her outer presentation, her history, her lifestyle is nothing that really seems to jive until that point with what's coming out of her and her ability to see what Hashem is doing, which differentiates from so many people around her. So this woman of contrast, which is just incredible, because, for example, the oral Torah teaches us that she actually marries Yehoshua. She ends up being the mother of 8 great priests, the great-great-grandmother of great priests and prophets, including Jeremiah and Yechezkel. That means there's something that, that came out of this woman that everyone was willing to give up on. And the Aleinu, which we say every day, if any of you are familiar with the Siddur, the Aleinu, which again expresses the idea of universal tikkun, which was attributed to Joshua's writing, also contains her words that, Hashem above it and Hashem below. It's the same Hashem. It's all connected. And she, the idea is the humility that Rachav had and that the Caleb and Pinchas had is what opened to them up to seeing what was being put before them. Because what these second set of spies ostensibly were experiencing was not that great. It was kind of humiliating, actually. These great people, they end up in this brothel. They're found out in minutes. They're listening to this lady. They come back to Joshua. They have nothing to report except what one woman told them, and she's not such a, I don't know what kind of messenger for them. And that's all they have. And they see it as Hashem's hand, and they find the greatness in that. Rachav also, split second. She's been cooking this, absorbing this, and boom, the window of opportunity comes, and she hears it, she expresses it, and she runs with it. She is greatly courageous. We have these armies all poised, and she is taking a very dangerous stance and saying, I don't know, they were run, go, and she just went with it. Okay. So how we're willing to see makes all the difference in the world. Going beyond the shallow view, which of course blocks us. It blocks us to the moments in our lives. And if we're blocked to the moment in our lives, we can't develop, we can't change, we can't grow, we can't affect change in our environment. So how do we, again, develop the vision? We develop the vision with the word, again, cheresh, in verse 2. It's a redundant word. It's an extra word. It doesn't belong there because it's saying they spied secretly. We know that the Torah does not use extraneous words, and there's no poetry, as it were. Everything is very purposeful and short and specific. And when we look at cheresh, it's an extra word. We even hear it, cheresh. We hear it. It was a total secret to the nation because there was something else. But what it was, it's very interesting. The oral tradition says, how did they get into Jericho? It was this huge hubbub because it was the place to be because they were all converging there. So they went into the chaotic life that was Jericho before the nation entered. And they went in under the cover of clay pottery merchants. So that's what cheresh is teaching us because the Midrash plays on the word. Cheresh has the same sound as cheres, which is clay pot. So they went in and they were clay pot merchants. And so they went unnoticed because it was like the Tupperware of that time. And so they were in there and so you can say, okay, that's nice. But if we said that there's something going on here because there's no mission here, there's no motivation here, there's no recon here, there's no success here, there's something else here. So we know the Medrash is not literal. It doesn't have to be literal. So what is it? What is it? So we understand that, when you have a beautiful vessel, that you show off and it's very beautiful and the vessel is something. But we know, especially in that time, a clay pot is nothing. It's nothing. It's an earthen pot. It's nothing. It's functional. And its value is solely based on its contents. Right? What you put in there. You can't see it from the outside. Also, you could have, you could have a clay pot with the most beautiful oil, most valuable oil, and a clay pot that has, some stale, bitter wine. And from the outside, you don't know. But when you do know, the value of that vessel is its contents. And again, that is human experience, really, because, Hashem formed us from the earth, and we are vessels, and we contain the soul, and we march along this very mundane world wondering why Hashem did it that way. But the idea is because our goal with Hashem's help is to fill this vessel through the use of the senses, through the sensual world that Hashem put us into, to make the vessel something worthy. These spies, in short, gave us a lesson in vesselhood. So it really is about what we choose to fill ourselves up with. And it takes a certain amount of humility, because are we filling ourselves up with what? With what? Who do we want to be? Because we'll be who we want to be. Hashem doesn't tie our hands. He gives us all the opportunities, the choices, the insights, the opportunities, the windows, and it's up to us ultimately. So if we become vessels for Hashem, this is again an answer to we are the very righteous. And again, we have to be so careful when we approach the first set of spies. It's a very deep topic. There's so much that needs to be understood, and we're taking it from this one specific angle. But even though there was an ego problem there with those spies, it was meant for the service of Hashem. But again, it was Hashem according to how they wrote the script. It wasn't Hashem according to how Hashem wrote the script for them. And so that becomes an ego trap. Even when we're very elevated, even when we are well motivated, that's what could happen at a time like that. So it's Hashem according to Hashem, and not Hashem according to me. So these spies model a receptacle for humility, as does Rachav, throwing her lot in. It's the humility of, how to approach something precious that Hashem might be showing us in a very muddled way. Sometimes he's showing us something very dazzling that's really very barren and sterile inside. And sometimes he's showing us something that, we would just shake our hand at, that is tremendously precious inside. So the vesselhood lesson is both about becoming vessels for Hashem and choosing how we fill ourselves up, and knowing what we put in there is going to be ultimately our value, that we can fault no one but ourselves, because it's what we chose. That's the value we want. And it's also about how we perceive other people, these snap judgments, these stuck places about what we think about other people, we assume about other people, or what our ego is invested in thinking about other people because of circumstances, because of whatever prejudices we might have. And so, again, the challenge of being able, it's a very hard thing. It's a lifetime of work, this vesselhood. And again, it goes back, as my husband said before, everything to the Garden of Eden, because, what happened in the garden when they ate before they ate from the tree? Everything was clearly, entirely, seamlessly, effortlessly directed toward godliness, toward sanctity. It was so clear. It was very, very clear. Everything was extremely clear, and the eating set into motion a new reality. And that's where everything became confused and mixed up, and it set into the reality that serving Hashem and serving self are very muddled. Good and evil, profane and sanctified, very muddled, very hard to discover, because it's all mixed up together. And that now became our mission. Our mission as human beings is to, sift through, to excavate, to examine, to dig up, to deal with the consequences of the eating and elevate, search for godliness in this confused world. It's really hard. We all know from the challenges that we go through that, this is not lip service. This is a lifetime of work. And it is wonderfully amazing that Rachav is teaching us about the secret of the tree of knowledge, Tova, Ra, good and evil as well. She says in verse 6, chapter 2, it says right there that she hid the spies in Pishtei Ha'etz, the flax of the tree. Okay, now, first of all, if you don't read it in Hebrew, it doesn't even say that. It says this, but, you don't get it. So first of all, flax, if anybody knows how flax grows, I don't think it's a tree. Okay, it's not a tree. There's stalks. So, and then it's the tree, the hey hayidiyah, the underlining hey, the tree. So, and it says she hid the spies, in other words, danger. She's just sent them on the wild goose chase. Every military person who is anybody's salt is right there, and she's doing this whole thing. And it says that she hid them in the flax of the tree, again, an allusion to Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge, that was set out for her. Check it up, it's right there. Set out for her. In other words, she is a microcosm of a human being, with the choices are there. It's up for us to discern. It's a lifetime of work. She had a very hard life until she got to this point. It's a lifetime of work. And she puts them there. So she the sages teach us that the flax, she lived in the wall, which is another whole thing. We won't do that today. She lived in the wall, and she had these clandestine meetings with men, and she had this window, and they made these ropes out of flax, and they would get in and out of the wall because she was the border through these ropes made out of flax. So she grabs the moment. She grabs the Eitz Hadat rectifying moment, and she takes these resources that she had profaned, the resources that she had, and she repurposes them to something totally different. She realigns. She takes her whole history in that moment, and she realigns herself. She becomes somebody else with the things that she always was, which is a beautiful, beautiful concept. It's not about burning bridges. So it's about listening to the static, because now after the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge, there's a lot of static all the time, and we have to listen through the static because things aren't as they appear. So, both the Rachav and the second set of spies, they give us this lesson in vesselhood, which a part of it is about fixing. It's about fixing, and it's the capacity to fix. It's about realigning, which of course is tshuva, and tashuv hey, return to Hashem. That's what teshuva literally means, and Rav Kook famously says it's returning to ourselves. It's not like, oh, I hate myself. It's returning to ourselves. And it's about, and Rav Kook also says that even in the garden, when Hashem says, Ayeka, where are you? Hashem is not playing hide and seek with them. Hashem knows exactly where each and every one of us are. He was talking to Adam and Eve, and he was saying, look at yourself. Where are you? Where have you put yourself? Where are you? Where do you want to be? And so that's why, the stages of tshuva, we know them, it's remorse. Because if we don't regret something, we can't change anything. It's a precondition. And we know that, disengaging from whatever we're doing is another step. Because we have to have the willingness to try and disengage. Or again, how could we change something while we're in it? We can't do that either. And then there's the resolution for the future, which of course means, if we want to fix something, we need a plan. We need a plan. We need to know how we're going forward. Now, the tshuva process does not say you're not going to fall on your face 1,000 times. So if I have a resolution for the future, it doesn't mean that's it. It's hermetically sealed. It's over. It doesn't work that way. Human beings are fallible. They are vulnerable. And the journey of this is precious to Hashem. And we could prove it in a way that is maybe a little bit unusual, but very potent. Before Moshe leaves the world, in Parshat Vayelech, in chapter 31, verse 4, over there it talks about, I'm not going to read it because of time, talks about, they're about to go in. Give them a break. They're about to part from Moshe. This is it. I'm sure they're terrified. I'm sure they're nostalgic. I'm sure they're concerned about how they're going to get through. I'm sure everyone is thinking about the people that they've left behind. And I'm sure they're all thinking about all the mess that required them to stay in the desert for 40 years. So give them a break. But no, doesn't seem like they get a break. Because basically, if you open up those words there that Hashem is telling Moshe to give over, basically it says, you will mess up royally. You're going into the land and forget it. You're messing up royally. You are messing up. And you say, that doesn't sound encouraging. It doesn't sound like the loving words that they need to hear when they're about to leave Moshe and go on the next part of the unbelievable changes in their lives. But actually, ultimately, this is the most sweet encouragement possible. And the reason for that is because Hashem doesn't expect angels. He doesn't expect us to be angels. He doesn't expect us to be perfect. And he doesn't want us to expect angels in our lives either. He doesn't want us to expect anyone around us to be perfect. We are people, and that's why he put us here, and that's what he loves about us. And he loves that we're struggling. And part of our humanity is the falling, and you can't get up if you don't fall. And we see this throughout the Torah, both written and oral. And so knowing in advance, this is the kindest thing. Because if they would go and they would mess up, and they weren't hearing this from Hashem, as a pep talk actually, the day that they were going to fall and mess up, if we don't have this expectation of falling, this will lead us to terrible bitterness, defiance, despair. That's it. Slam the door. That's what's going to happen if we are not expecting to be fallible. And here they're going on this new high, and there's going to be more lows, and you're going to mess up. And it says and Hashem is not going to forget the covenant. And yes, it's a cycle of life because we don't give up, and that's what teshuvah is. It's the constant returning. And as a matter of fact, right after the golden calf, when Hashem reveals to Moshe to teach the 13 attributes of Hashem, one of them there is nosei avon v'pesha. That it literally means that Hashem overlooks wrongdoing. Okay, that's what it means. Hashem overlooks wrongdoing. That's what it's translated as, but the literal interpretation is that Hashem carries the wrongdoing. That's incredible. It's like carries the wrongdoing. And so, what is that? First of all, the fact that we were fallible and that we go through this rigorous, emotional, wrenching process, though we fell on our face 1,000 times, we are transforming this wrongdoing into a whole beautiful thing for Hashem. Because here we are, like we haven't given up on ourselves or him, and we're going at it again. And so ultimately, we literally, nosei avon v'pesha, Hashem, it's like a tidal wave, a driving force, the act of sorting through and, ripping ourselves in order to get to this place creates this tidal force that catapults ourselves to another whole place. So it's not about eradicating, as we see from Rachav, it's not about eradicating our past. It's about harnessing the energy of it and using it as a slingshot. And so it's not mending, it's transforming. So we take the mundane to sanctity, but we also take the mess to sanctity. This is a life work. It's a life in progress, for 120 years, as we say. So they're at this window here, this window of opportunity between them. And there's a comfort zone that's being jarred here at this meeting between, think about it, Kalev and Pinchas and Rachav. It's a real jarring of the comfort zone. She's shocked, they're all shocked, and they're in the moment. And this flash of insight that they seem to have the courage to move beyond, again, because they've made themselves into vessels, because they're paying attention, because they're not being rigid in their thought, because they're not giving up on Hashem's creation, because they're not turning their back on the material world around them, because they're looking at a very wide view of Hashem's rectification process for the entire universe. There's a lot of becauses. So it doesn't mean they weren't afraid, doesn't mean that ego didn't bubble up, but it means that they didn't allow these things to block them. It means that they overcame it. They overcame it. They were able to get past what Hashem should want. Like, Hashem shouldn't want this mission to be a bomb. Hashem shouldn't want, for all time, it says, they got to the house of Rachav Hazona, the prostitute, and they slept there. He doesn't want that. That doesn't sound nice. We don't want this. And so, but that's not how it is. That's not how it is. That's not how it is. And she says, it's just incredible. It's really incredible, because you look at it, the first set of spies, so pure, so great, tasted only Hashem, lived only Hashem. They were given every possible pampering on their sojourn, 40 days in Israel, undetected, watching everything, not getting their hands dirty, schlepping back all this beautiful fruit. And what they came back with was, all they saw was a spiritual wasteland, doom and gloom, nothing, and they didn't see any of the divine providence. Joshua's spies and Rachav go through deep humiliation, utter failure, misery, 3 days of nothingness, come back with the leg, tail between their legs, barely catching up to the nation as they're going into the land. And they come back, Hashem gave it to us. That's what they say. Hashem, past tense, they quote Rachav, Hashem gave us the land. It's like, it's not what you see, it's how you look. It's how you look. So they went as tourists, UN observers. They had their thing. They were in an echo chamber, those first set. The second set got their hands dirty. They experienced, they interacted. And because of that, a change happened in them. They were able to affect change in others. And the Medrash Tanchuma tells us that their arrival, because of how they arrived, activated the latent greatness in the nations. And that's what happened for them. And the oral tradition teaches us that when Israel is who they are meant to be, the righteous among the nations team up with them and are who they are meant to be. Because the spies represent Israel and Rachav, the nations. And again, the whole Aleinu, which is again written by Joshua, it talks about the tikkun, the tikkun olam, as it were, the universal rectification of Hashem's will for mankind. So then, and to end with the unbelievable. What do they do at the end? They tell her to tie this red string in her window. Okay, the same window where all the people were coming and going all the time, and they escaped. That window became, her salvation, because she ties a string there for her and her family, and their salvation because she let them escape to the hills. And it was the same window that was a very unsavory window. And this is what it was used for. And so they say, tie a red string in that window. And that's going to be the sign. It's very interesting because the walls are sunk in. They don't need the string in the window. They weren't scaling the walls. It was a miraculous thing. It's again an illumination for all of us, all generations. So the string is in the window, but in Hebrew it's so beautiful. It doesn't say the string in the window. It says this is why, again, I always say you have to learn in Hebrew. It says Tikvat chut hashani, which means the hope of the red string. but it's translated as the red string. But it says literally, no stretching. Tikvat chut hashani, the hope of the red string. Again, it was the hope for her, and it was the hope for all of mankind. It was the hope for the spies, because it was the message that was given over here. So, again, a chut, of course, is a string. And of course, we cannot but not think of the tzitzit that were given to the first set of spies. And here we have the string theme coming back, because what is a string? It connects above to below. So, it's connecting our body to our soul, us to Hashem's purpose for us, our earthiness to the sanctity, the people of Israel to the nations, the nation of Israel to its land, all mankind to each other. It's the connector, and in modern Hebrew also, it's called, it's vav hachibur. It means it unites. It's and. The vav is the uniting vav. So we see that right here as the uniting vav, and again, so that we don't stray. We have the connection. When we're connected, when we're rooted, then we have a clarity of vision, which was all about what's being taught here. So, and then it was red. It was a red string. And when we think red string, the first thing that comes to mind is a scapegoat on Yom Kippur, right? The scapegoat on Yom Kippur, what happens? The nation of Israel is struggling to work out everything that went wrong during their year, to analyze, to evaluate, to fix their year. And, as part of the service of the scapegoat, that red string turns white. It's again, the idea of the transformational power that we as human beings have, and that as Rachav and Kalev and Pinchas are teaching us, so beautifully, so timelessly, so powerfully, the hope of the red string. Because it's hope, because it reminds us of how Hashem believes in us, of our greatness. It reminds us that, literally, we can't give up on ourselves. We can't give up on our reality. We can't give up on others, and we certainly can't give up on Hashem. So it's a seamless message that really touches our hearts so powerfully. Today, as we're sitting in this room, and any person sitting in any room. So I thank you so much for this time that we got to share this idea, and thank you very, very much. It's always a precious honor to be here with all of you.